Hi, this is Denise from Denise in Wonderland, a magical journey of faith through Christ. Today, we will sink deeper into God's Word and His truth. We have to chase the presence of God, and we can do so through His Word. Let's get started. Job 19. Then Job answered, "How long will you torment me and crush me with words? You have reproached me 10 times. You aren't ashamed that you attack me. If it is true that I have erred, my error remains with myself. If indeed you will magnify yourselves against me and plead against me my reproach. Know now that God has subverted me and has surrounded me with his net. Behold, I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry for help, but there is no justice. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and has set darkness in my paths. He has stripped me of my glory and taken the crown from my head. He has broken me down on every side, and I am gone. He has plucked my hope up like a tree. He has also kindled his wrath against me. He counts me among his adversaries. His troops come on together, build a siege ramp against me, and encamp around my tent. He has put my brothers far from me. My acquaintances are wholly estranged from me. My relatives have gone away. My familiar friends have forgotten me. Those who dwell in my house and my maids consider me a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. I call to my servant, and he gives me no answer. I beg him with my mouth. My breath is offensive to my wife. I am loathsome to the children of my own mother. Even young children despise me. If I arise, they speak against me. All my familiar friends abhor me. They whom I loved have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh. I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have pity on me. Have pity on me, you, my friends. For the hand of God has touched me. Why do you persecute me as God and are not satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were now written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. But as for me, I know that my Redeemer lives. In the end, he will stand upon the earth. After my skin is destroyed, then I will see God in my flesh, whom I, even I, will see on my side. My eyes will see, and not as a stranger. My heart is consumed within me. If you say, how will we persecute him? Because the root of the matter is found in me. Be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishments of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. Chapter 20. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered, Therefore my thoughts answer me, even by reason of my haste that is in me. I have heard the reproof which puts me to shame. The spirit of my understanding answers me. Don't you know this from old times, since man was placed on earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, the joy of the godless but for a moment? Though his height mount up to the heavens, and his head reach to the clouds, excuse me, yet he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, Where is he? He will fly away as a dream and will not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye which saw him will see him no more. Neither will his place see him any more. His children will seek the favor of the poor. His hands will give back his wealth. His bones are full of his youth, but youth will lie down with him in the dust. Though wickedness is sweet in his mouth, though he hide it under his tongue, though he spare it and will not let it go, but keep it still within his mouth, yet his food in his bowels is turned. It is cobra venom within him. He has swallowed down riches, and he will vomit them up again. God will cast them out his belly. He will suck cobra venom. The viper's tongue will kill him. He will not look at the rivers, the flowing streams of honey and butter. He will restore that for which he labored, and will not swallow it down. He will not rejoice according to the substance that he has gotten, for he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently taken away a house, and he will not build it up, because he knew no quietness within him. He will not save anything of that in which he delights. There was nothing left that he didn't devour. Therefore, his prosperity will not endure. In the fullness of his sufficiency, distress will overtake him. The hand of everyone who is in misery will come on him. When he is about to fill his belly, God will cast the fierceness of his wrath on him. It will rain on him while he is eating. He will flee from the iron weapon. The bronze arrow will strike him through. He draws it out and it comes out of his body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his liver. Terrors are on him. All darkness is laid up for his treasures. An unfanned fire will devour him. It will consume that which is left in his tent. The heavens will reveal his iniquity. The earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart. They will rush away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion of a wicked man from God, the heritage appointed to him by God. Okay, so we hear from Job as well as a friend today. Excuse me. So in chapter 19, let's go ahead and start digging in. We've got chapter 19, Job is speaking in this entire chapter. And then we've got the first like 5, 6 verses where Job is actually against his friends. So he's talking to them. So we got verse 2. How long will you torment me and crush me with words? And verse 3, you have reproached me 10 times. You aren't ashamed that you attack me. So again, there's this back and forth of like each person, the friends telling Job this, as well as Job telling the friends, why do you even keep going? Now, I would say the only person who really has a say is Job. I mean, he's the one suffering. They're supposed to be there to be, remember yesterday of talking about them being horrible comforters. It's like, if you can't be a good comforter, why are you here? Why do you keep talking to me? And so um he brings up a good point, because then we got verse 6. Let's say verse 5 through verse 6. If indeed you will magnify yourselves against me and plead against me my reproach, know now that God has subverted me and has surrounded me with his net. So he's basically asking his friends, why do you even continue doing this? And basically it does beg the question, what is the purpose of them continuing these conversations? If they're really upset, why don't they just leave? Because they're not there to comfort. And also, Job is justifying these questions by saying in basically verse 6, hey, God is already against me. So that's already enough to deal with. Like, it's not even just enough to deal with. Like, if God is judging you, if God is targeting you, like, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. So why do you want to add on to that? I mean, he's like, it's not even possible to really add on to it. So he's got it taken care of, but, inflicting pain upon me. So again, why are you here? But then we go through verses 7 through 12, where then now he's transitioning, because he just said, hey, God's the one doing this to me. So he expounds upon that some more. So we've got, excuse me, we've got verse 8. He has walled up, he's referring to God. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and has set darkness in my paths. So he's basically saying, hey, God has surrounded me with darkness. And again, we're not talking about Job's sinful ways. He's like, so the reason why darkness is because there was a discussion also in the previous chapters about darkness. He's like, darkness has placed this around me. He's allowed this to just completely overtake me. And then he talks about in verse 7, where I know we're going backwards a little bit. Behold, I cry out of wrong, but I am not heard. I cry for help, but there is no justice. So he's also acknowledging, hey, God won't answer me. And this is a statement that really reflects why he's so frustrated with the friends. He's like, the only responses I'm getting are for people who cannot help, who make it worse. But even if they didn't make it worse, these people still would not be in a position to help him, because he believes that God is the one that has allowed this to happen. So the only way it can be reversed is through God. So he needs God to respond. And that's what he wants. And then we've got verse 10. He has broken me down on every side. Remember, he used those words before, or at least the translation used those words before. And I am gone. He has plucked my hope up like a tree. Again, there's just no hope. And then verse 11 through 12, he has also kindled his wrath against me. He counts me among his adversaries. His troops come on together, build a siege ramp against me, and encamp around my tent. So he's also accusing God of treating Job like an adversary or an enemy of God. And because he is an adversary of God, God has basically declared war on him. And as part of war, you surround your enemy. So that's why he's like, hey, God has surrounded me. He's blocked my escape, and he's basically ensured my destruction, which is what you would expect of an adversary who God has decided to wipe out. Then we've got verses 13 through 20. We hear him talk a lot more about how he just feels so alone. We've got verse 13. He has put my brothers far from me. My acquaintances are wholly estranged from me. Um, he's got no friends who really have concern for his welfare. Verse 14, my relatives have gone away. My familiar friends have forgotten me. Um, he's got no family. We talked about this before. And then we got verse 15, those who dwell in my house and my maids consider me a stranger. I am an alien in their sight. Then verse 16, I call to my servant and he gives me no answer. I beg him with my mouth. So we've got here, and this is quite sad. Um, even within his own home, um, he doesn't even hold a position of authority over his servants or his workers. So he has no respect. I mean, the fact that he's like, I've got to beg my servant just to do anything. And so we see how far he has fallen in the eyes of others as well. Then we've got verse 17, which is, it says, my breath is offensive to my wife. I'm loathsome to the children of my own mother. His wife is disgusted and repulsed by Job. Then we got verse 18. Even young children despise me. If I arise, they speak against me. This is horrible because children, especially back then, were taught to respect their elders. So what this means is that even children won't respect him. And it probably speaks to that public humiliation. That word has gotten around throughout the entire community that he's just this horrible person. And then we've got verse 20. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh. I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. He's basically describing his body like his body is a prison, it's a cage, and he's wasting away. And he's forced to kind of like witness this. And then we're going to we shift now to starting in verses 21 over the next few verses, where Job is trying to cry out for some kind of relief, some kind of mercy. Because in 21, he says, have pity on me, you, my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you persecute me as God and are not satisfied with my flesh? He's like, he's desperate. He's like, hey, have mercy on me. Hey, after all, God has judged me. God is already actively destroying me. So, so aren't you satisfied with what you see, with what has happened to me? So can you at least just throw a little bit of mercy my way? I'm going to jump to verse 25. This is like, I could have written forever this morning, and I was like, I got to stop. I got to record. But here's the verse. But as for me, I know that my Redeemer lives. In the end, he will stand upon the earth. Um, this is my Redeemer. This is Redeemer is Goel. It stands for like a kinsman redeemer. This is one of the most powerful verses of this entire chapter. And we see this glimpse of Job having a little bit of faith, even in the midst of just lamenting, complaining. He's whined a little bit, and also being angry. We've seen that too. But we see these little glimpses. So basically, here, like I said, Redeemer, it means in the Hebrew is like a kinsman redeemer. So It's Goel. Now, a redeemer could be both human or divine. So, in the case of a human, if you were a kinsman redeemer, usually that person back then would avenge the blood of their relative. So, someone, it does not matter. If someone comes after, kills your family member, so they would not allow that to be unanswered. They would go, they would avenge the blood because they would say, I stand for this person and you had no right to take his blood. So I will answer this murder of my family member. And then we have, in some cases, too, it could have meant for a human being who's a redeemer. Um, they might seek the release of a captive family member. So if they're imprisoned, they might pay the debt, or hey, they might go in there and go get them. But basically, this family member defended the cause of their kinsman. This is the person that they're like, this person belongs to me. They are a part of my family. Like, this is not just a metaphorical term of being a brother. Like, no, I treat this is like a blood relative, or at least I treat this person as a blood relative, and I will stand for them. We've also got, and when we refer to the Redeemer, which is referenced so many times throughout, especially the book of the Old Testament, when we talk about the divine Redeemer, we could be referring to, it's one of the titles of the Messiah, of Jesus Christ himself. And he is the one that stands for us, defends us. And if, as we look ahead to the New Testament, we know that Jesus himself actually paid the price for our sin to release us from the impending judgment of death. So Jesus is the ultimate redeemer. He's the one that stands for us. So we've seen it. So, and then also too, we've seen in the Old Testament where God will actually send a human redeemer. I mean, if you think about the judges, throughout the book of Judges, those are redeemers. God's constantly, the people cry out and he says, okay, I will assign a redeemer. And a lot of times these people cried out because they experienced some kind of destruction or oppression. And a lot of times it was a result of their own sin. But God could not, even though he was wrathful and there was judgment being executed, because of his mercy, because of his love, he could not just witness it. And so he would raise a judge, raise a redeemer, basically a human one, to constantly fight for them, to release them from the pain and the oppression that they have been experiencing, even if it was earned. So this is great that we're seeing Job here. He has confidence now. He has confidence, and I believe here he's not talking about a human redeemer. He's talking about the divine redeemer, because he's saying he will come. Because remember, Job has no faith, and he says he got no family, he has no friends. So he's talking about a divine redeemer. He's like a redeemer who comes from heaven will basically help him. And so Job is basically telling God, I know you exist. And think about it. Job, remember, spent a large amount of time in his life worshiping God, praising God. So God knows that, I'm not God, excuse me. Job knows that the God who is loving and merciful exists. But this is a good theological concept for us to understand, that Job is acknowledging that God himself does deeply love. He is very merciful and graceful, but he's also acknowledging that God does have wrath. God does judge, and God can turn his back on you. But it's neat to see this picture, because let's face it, that's why we needed Jesus Christ, because we were estranged from our God because of our sin. But Jesus bridged the gap as a redeemer. So we've got here Job. Now I still want to make a reference to that again. God was not angry with Job, and he was not judging Job when all this stuff initially happened. But this is such a great place for Job to be, to finally acknowledge, hey, he's my redeemer. And then it gets better. Verses 26 through 27, he says, after my skin is destroyed, then I will see God in my flesh, whom even I, will see on my side. My eyes will see and not as a stranger. So he's saying that after, like, even if my body is basically just gone, but he's saying that I will see God in my flesh. And I think you can see it in two different ways. And it doesn't matter which way. Either God will allow the body to reach the point of the precipice of death and he will fully restore him, or Job could be referring to resurrection again, because remember, a few chapters before we talked about resurrection. So it's quite possible that he's saying, oh no, I'm not just going to see God in Sheol, in the place of the dead. I'm going to see him in my flesh. I will see him redeem me. And so we will see it. So either via resurrection, like his body will actually die and he brings him back. So he can see God redeem him, or God will just let the body reach close to death and fully restore it and he will be redeemed. So either way, Job is expressing this huge amount of faith. How many of us truly believe that we could die tomorrow and God bring us back to life within a minute? Now, I don't know if many people think of that. Think about Lazarus. Remember, one of the major miracles that Jesus Christ did on earth was to raise the dead. And Jesus did not say that that was going to stop when he died. So we need to think about, do we even though Job has been whining and complaining, do we have this faith? To be honest with you, and I don't mind being transparent, I don't know if I have this kind of faith. When I got really ill recently, it got pretty bad. And, your mind starts playing tricks on you when you get so sick and you think you're going to the hospital. Your mind goes to the craziest places. And, I called upon other people to pray for me on my behalf. But even I reached a point where spiritually, I was just feeling really torn down. But seriously, I'm not sure, if someone dies tomorrow, do you believe in that moment that they've died that they can be raised from the dead? This is people will probably in your church call you crazy, but the thing is, Jesus Christ mentions it, and resurrection is mentioned. Not just the resurrection when we die, but resurrection is mentioned as a miracle, because God is a miracle maker. He is a redeemer. So I want you to think about that. Even with everything that's happened with Job, he's got these flashes of faith. And this is why it is so important to have a strong foundation in having faith in Jesus Christ, as well as the Father, as well as God. And this is why it's important to also have a strong foundation in the Word of God, because there will be times that will be rough. There will be times that just challenge our faith. But even if you fall deeply and your faith is not where it needs to be, there should be a flash where you say, hold up. If God did this for Job, if God did this for whatever, or if God did this for me in the past, surely he can do this. Don't limit God in his capacity for the things that he can do for you. Now, we've got a warning here. We got verses 28 through 29. This is where, again, Job is now addressing the friends. He says, if you say, how will we persecute him? Because the root of the matter is found in me. Be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishments, of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. So in verse 28, basically, he's saying, you guys have been basically saying, how can we just persecute him, because we know that Job is responsible for what has happened to him. And so he's warning his friends. He's like, hey, look, I just discussed I've got a redeemer coming. There's a God of love and mercy in the God that's also wrathful. And when he comes, you need to be afraid of his judgment, because God will judge you for this. So he's telling them, hey, you might want to stop because he will avenge me. Because that's what kinsmen, and they would understand this concept like, he will avenge me. And if he avenges me, all these things you've been complaining about that they love spending 15, 16 verses talking about what God does to the wicked, those very things may come upon them. So that's why he's given a little warning right here. So now we're going to shift to chapter 20. This is Zophar the Naamathite who answers. We got verses 2 and 3 where he says, therefore my thoughts answer me, even by reason of my haste that is in me. I have heard the reproof which puts me to shame. The spirit of my understanding answers me. Basically, Zophar's like, hey, I can't be quiet. I feel insulted because I feel like you're trying to correct me. And so now he's like shamed by this, but not in a good way, not shamed like, oh, let me examine myself. No, instead, he wants to defend himself and criticize Job, and again instruct Job in what happens to the wicked. Again, I mean, they're so like singular minded, these friends. At least Job, we're seeing a man that is broken. He's constantly sometimes complaining to God, complaining to the friends. But then he has some kind of like, remember, he gave a warning to his friends. So obviously cares a little bit. And then he also has mentioned a few things about the goodness of God. So at least Job is not one-minded. We're seeing these friends, they're rinsing and repeating over and over again. So we got basically the rest of it, of this chapter 20 of just Zophar is just talking about the certainty of the destruction of the wicked. So we've got verse 5 where he says that the triumphing of the wicked is short, the joy of the godless but for a moment. So he's saying, hey, the success of the wicked is short term, and eventually joy will flee the wicked. So Job should not expect joy, really. And if he does, it's going to go away. And then verses 6-7, though his height mount up to the heavens and his head reach to the clouds, yet he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? So he's saying, like, even if the wicked, when he's talking about the heights, he's saying it doesn't matter how well they thrive, even if they experience some kind of prosperity, progress, they eventually will become as nothing, like dung. And everyone will say, oh, well, what happened to so-and-so? How far he's fallen. Then we got verses 8-9. He will fly away as a dream and will not be found. I'm not going to read the rest, but it's basically saying there will be no memory of the wicked. Then we've got verses 12-14. I won't read the whole. Well, I may. Though wickedness is sweet in his mouth, though he hide it under his tongue, though he spare it and will not let it go, but keep it still within his mouth, yet his food in his bowels is turned. It is cobra venom within him. So even if the wicked tries to hold on to something good, something sweet, eventually that wickedness itself is like poison from a cobra venom. It will eventually destroy the wicked from inside out. So basically their wickedness condemns their body to infirmity and eventual death. Then we've got verse 15. He has swallowed down riches and he will vomit them up again. God will cast them out of his belly. So God is going to make the wicked expel all his previous wealth. Like, man, it is basically by referring to vomiting, like, even if the man tries to hold all his treasure, hold on to his health, God will force it to come up and to be moved far away from him or her. There's no way that once God has decided to strike you down, there's no way that you can hold on to anything. Everything will go. Verses 18-19, he will restore that for which he labored and will not swallow it down. He will not rejoice according to the substance that he has gotten, for he is oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently taken away a house and he will not build it up. So he's like, hey, even if the wicked can, let's say, regain the wealth, whether it's by working or by taking stuff from people, no joy or contentment will come from even having it. And not to mention, he's probably going to lose eventually that as well. again. So it'll be stuck in this constant cycle of continual loss. Then we've got verse 19, that which I already read. So let's see. Oh, I wrote down reading my notes. So I had asked a question. I was reading this. I said, "What is the point of Bildad saying this?" Because talking about the wicked oppressing and forsaking the poor, because is he like, I'm wondering why he's saying this, because there's a purpose. A lot of the stuff they're saying is obviously they're trying to refer to Job, but trying to speak generally. And it's like, are they saying, is he trying to imply that Job was like this? Because Job, we all know, was not like this. And what's crazy is, the friends saw with their own eyes. The reason why they were friends with him is because he was not like this. So we're not talking about a hidden sin at this point. We're talking about a sin that would have been well known by a lot. If you're oppressing and forsaking the poor, it would have been very obvious. He would have lost respect in the community. So it's just strange that they're saying this. Like, at this point, the friends aren't even using any reason. Then we got verse 21. There was nothing left that he didn't devour, therefore his prosperity will not endure. So basically, the wicked always consumes everything. They consume and they destroy people, things, themselves. That's just the way of the wicked. Verse 22, in the fullness of his sufficiency, distress will overtake him. The hand of everyone who's in misery will come on him. So basically, the wicked's victims will eventually judge and harm the wicked. Like, eventually, those who are oppressed kind of rise up against. And in addition to that, like in verse 23, when he's about to fill his belly, God will cast the fierceness of his wrath on him. It will rain on him while he's eating. So even God, and then after that, God will then unleash his anger as well. And the fact that it's like rain, it's like it's inescapable. And it's funny, it's while he's eating, like in the middle of him consuming consuming and benefiting from what he thinks is his prosperity, God will just will God will execute judgment on him in the middle. So in the middle of doing good things, like it'll just come out of nowhere, kind of like rain. Verse 24, he will flee from the iron weapon, the bronze arrow will strike him through. So even if the wicked runs, because you will be running from the sword, um, you cannot escape the arrow, because the arrow can be unleashed from any place. So again, the wicked is targeted. And then verse 25, he draws it out and it comes out of his body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his liver. Terrors are on him. So he's like, even if the wicked can figure out, okay, I got an arrow in me, let me pull it out. Even if he can remove the arrow, death is assured. And fear will come across the wicked when the wicked realizes death is coming soon and there's nothing I can do about it. Then we've got verse 26. All darkness is laid up for his treasures. All unfanned fire will devour him. It will consume that which is left in his tent. So all that the wicked possessed will be destroyed. I'm going to jump to 28 and go back to 27. 28 is the increase of his house will depart. They will rush away in the day of his wrath. So there will never be any increase. And I want you to think about, I believe it was in our previous study, we talked about how sulfur was being laid out on the land. So again, we're talking about like a curse, like eventually the wicked becomes cursed, where there will be no increase. The fire destroys not just the person, but all that they possess, and nothing will ever arise from anything they ever owned, did, or everything's gone. So it is a curse. And then we're going to go back to 27. The heavens will reveal his iniquity. The earth will rise up against him. So again, the friends are saying, hey, God always reveals evildoers' iniquities through earthly judgment. So again, this is a dig at Job, saying, all this stuff happening, all these feelings, the darkness surrounding you, this is just God's way of revealing that you have some kind of iniquity. So that completes Job 19 through 20. I know we'll read 21 through 22 tomorrow. We might be reading 23 as well. I can't remember. But I hope the word of God blessed you. And I just want you to think a little bit more about that kinsman redeemer. Look up the different references to the redeemer, because a lot of times when we're going through life and no one can quite help us, even people that try hard to help us, sometimes it's still not enough. Sometimes you just want a redeemer. You want a redeemer who is not human. And so just spend some time thinking about that, praying for that, asking God if there's something weighing heavy on your heart, give it to God. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day. God bless you. Bye.